The Great Pyramid of Giza went up in about 20 years, roughly 2 million blocks of stone stacked more than 140 meters into the sky, and no blueprint, no building plan, no engineering diagram for it has ever been found. For 2,000 years, the only description anyone had of how it was actually built came from a Greek visitor who arrived 2,000 years after the fact and wrote that the king drove his people into forced labor like cattle. That account shaped how the world pictured the pyramid ever since. Then, in a cave on Egypt's Red Sea coast, archaeologists found something that told a very different story. A papyrus logbook, now called the Diary of Merah, written in the crew's own hand while the pyramid was still going up. If a mystery that took 4,000 years to solve is your kind of thing, subscribe and stay for the document that finally settled it. Khufu came to Egypt's throne around 2560 BC, the second king of the 4th dynasty, and set his architects to build a tomb larger than any structure attempted before or since. His pyramid was cut and stacked from more than 2 million blocks of limestone and granite, some weighing several tons apiece, dragged and lifted with no wheel, no pulley, no iron tool harder than the stone itself. It was finished in roughly 2 decades and stood as the tallest structure on Earth for nearly 4,000 years, a record no other building would break until the Industrial Age. Even that 20-year figure is an estimate stitched together from indirect evidence. Ancient king lists disagree on how long Khufu actually reigned, which means the timeline for his pyramid is itself a best reconstruction, not a number carved anywhere in stone. The scale of the logistics alone is hard to picture. Most of the core blocks were quarried right at Giza, but the outer casing stones, the polished white limestone that once made the whole structure gleam in the sun, were cut across the river at Tura and ferried in. The chambers deep inside were lined with red granite hauled from hundreds of miles upriver, in blocks too heavy for any wheeled cart the Egyptians are known to have used. And for all that effort, the finished base came out nearly a perfect square, its 4 sides oriented to true north within a fraction of a degree, a level of precision modern surveyors still find difficult to explain without instruments Khufu's engineers are not known to have had. The man credited with running the whole project was Khufu's own nephew, Hemyunu, who held the title Overseer of all the king's works and was buried in a tomb of his own beside the pyramid he built, complete with a statue of himself as a heavyset official surveying his life's achievement. But not one document from his office survives. No ledger of blocks quarried, no schedule of shifts, no drawing of the ramps or levers his crews might have used. Everything modern engineers know about how the pyramid actually rose has had to be reconstructed after the fact, one clue at a time. For most of those centuries, one voice filled that silence louder than any other. The Greek historian Herodotus traveled through Egypt around the middle of the 5th century BC, 2,000 years after Khufu's reign, and recorded what local guides told him in a book called the Histories. He wrote that Khufu closed every temple in the land and forced the entire population into labor, rotating gangs of 100,000 men through 3-month shifts for 20 years straight, under a king his sources remembered as cruel and hated. He added a detail almost too strange to leave out. When the treasury ran short partway through construction, Herodotus wrote, Khufu placed his own daughter in a brothel and had her charge each visitor a fee, using what she earned to help pay for the stone. He even claimed she asked every customer for 1 block of stone as a private gift of his own, and used them to build a small pyramid of her own beside her father's. Modern historians treat the story as folklore, the kind of scandalous tale a Greek visitor would have been fed to keep him listening, but it shows how far the pyramid's reputation had already drifted from history into legend within 2,000 years of Khufu's death. Herodotus never watched a single block laid. He was repeating stories passed down for 2,000 years by guides with every reason to entertain a paying visitor. But for centuries afterward, in a country with no competing written account, his version was copied and repeated by nearly everyone who wrote about the pyramid next, until sheer repetition made it look like settled fact rather than one traveler's second-hand story. The Great Pyramid, built by slaves, under the whip, at the will of a tyrant, hardened into common knowledge. Egyptologists spent much of the 20th century arguing over how much of it to believe, with almost no direct evidence from the builders themselves to settle it either way. In 2013, archaeologists excavating storage caves at a site called Wadi al-Jarf, an ancient harbor on Egypt's Red Sea coast, found papyrus fragments older than any writing ever recovered from Egypt. Among them was the private logbook of a mid-level official named Merah, who commanded a boat crew hauling limestone from the Tura quarries across the Nile to the Giza building site. In the final years of Khufu's reign, it records, day by day, exactly what Merah's crew did and exactly what they were given in return. The crossing was not simple. Merah's boats worked a network of canals and basins built specifically to move stone, loading at Tura, unloading near the base of the pyramid, then turning around for the next run, trip after trip, for months at a stretch. The diary names the crew, tracks their shifts on the water, and logs the rations issued to feed them: bread, beer, meat. Nothing in it describes chains, whips, or forced conscription. It describes a functioning logistics operation, provisioned and paid, moving stone on a schedule tight enough to keep pace with a construction site racing to finish a king's tomb before he died. Excavations back at Giza back up the same picture. Archaeologists have uncovered a purpose-built settlement beside the pyramids, with bakeries and breweries large enough to feed thousands, and a cemetery for workers who died on the job, buried with the same care given to respected craftsmen, not discarded like slaves. It matches a labor system Egyptologists have traced across other periods of Egyptian history too: work owed to the crown for part of the year, paid in food, drink, and sometimes land, not chattel slavery passed down for life. None of it proves the work was easy, or that every laborer wanted to be there. Whether every man in Merah's crew showed up willingly is a separate question the diary does not answer. Obligation and choice were not always distinct concepts in a system where refusing crown labor could carry its own consequences. What the evidence does rule out is Herodotus's picture of chained gangs under the lash. And the deeper engineering question, exactly how 2 million blocks were raised without a single surviving diagram, is still open. Internal ramps, external ramps built up around the outside, or some combination of both have all been proposed, and each new excavation tends to complicate the leading theory rather than confirm it. The men who built the Great Pyramid left behind proof of who they were. They never left behind proof of how they did it. Which surprises you more? That the pyramid's own myth of slave labor came from a man who never saw it built, or that the proof against it sat in a cave for 4,000 years before anyone found it? Tell me in the comments. Khufu's own resting place inside that pyramid was found empty, its granite sarcophagus intact, but its lid, and everything else inside it, long gone. That mystery is for another night.